Hey, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Right School Matters podcast. Listen, we're having a blast talking about various topics in K-12 education, and know that our ultimate goal is simply to provide some helpful information to parents and families as they are making critical decisions about where their kids are going to go to school. There are so many great options out there, and it can be extremely overwhelming. This podcast is sponsored by Family to Family Relocation and Real Estate, your experts with schools and homes, and whose mission really is to provide professional guidance and professional assistance in educating families and parents about their options regarding schools in different areas while searching for a new home. And so, with that said, let's jump in and check out today's conversation. Hey, so we are here again on the Right School Matters podcast and excited to welcome Rachael Barron, who is the owner and CEO of her business called Effective Students. And Rachael is here to talk with us or with me so that you all can see and watch and listen about this idea of executive functioning. Rachael spends her time and her days working with her team to support kids on providing strategies and opportunities to benefit their executive functioning skills so that they have greater success in the classroom. And so with that said, Rachael, thank you for being here. How are you today?
I'm fantastic, Paul. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's the privilege is all mine. And I know we were talking a little bit offline and realized we needed to probably hit the record button and allow folks here, some of the good things that we were already talking about. And so thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know this is a busy time of year for you. And so I appreciate you jumping on with me. And so before we dive into this topic of executive functioning, just tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about Effective Students.
Great. Thanks so much for having me again. So a little bit about me. I've been in Atlanta since '87. I've raised my family here. I have a very patient husband who lets me explore and do and start new things, which is great. I have three amazing boys who are 26, 23, and 20, all very different kids, and they're hysterical. And now that they're adults, it's fun to be with them. But I do remember when they were younger, it was a little challenging. A little bit about me. I went to Emory University, studied political science and French, neither of which I use today, which is kind of funny. But I also one of my main philosophies is nothing is wasted, right? So if we experience adversity in our own lives, right, how do we take those lemons and turn it into lemonade? There's always something to be learned from that, always some way we can grow from that. And if we can then turn back and strengthen the next person who's coming along and give them some hope and encouragement and share something that we've learned, it just makes our world a little bit of a better place. So that's just a little bit about me and our family.
I love that. What a great perspective. Tell us who Effective Students is and what you all do.
Great. So Effective Students is an executive functioning coaching practice. And some people are like, well, what is that? So it's a partnership that we have with families. So we function like a coach. So if you think about a sports coach, and our job is to equip and prepare students to tackle school or approach school in a way that's successful for them. Many students are not taught how to do school, right? So we think about the demands on kids today, managing their time, organizing their materials, both in hard copy and digitally, right? So we kind of teach them how to do those things when it doesn't come naturally to them or easily to them. And if we're not careful in community, when we talk about K-12 schools, kids who struggle in these areas become disillusioned with learning. And that's the opposite effect that we want learning to have for them. So if we can show them the ramp or build the ramp for them to manage and successfully tackle the demands that are placed on them, that they're going to be encouraged to persevere and continue to learn. And just a little bit about some background, the presence of individuals with neurodiversities in post-secondary education is significantly diminishing, because they're not able to actually stay in college without the structure that needs to be in there for them to succeed. And so what one of our callings is to equip kids to do that successfully, if that is indeed their pathway, and optimize their potential there, so that by the time they get there, that wonderful investment their parents are making is successful too.
Yeah, that's important. That is really important because it doesn't stop when you graduate high school, right?
Yeah.
It really is just beginning. Well, thank you for sharing that. That gives us an idea about what you do. And you are celebrating 10 years in the business this year. That's
We are.
exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. If you'd have told me 10 years ago this is where we would be, I would have said like, no way, I can't believe it. But I started this company because for 6 years prior, I'd been an educational advocate, and I found that this was a real space that was missing for kids, really, very bright children who were not reaching their potential. And so I started working with kids, and then my schedule got full, and I hired another person and then wrote a curriculum. So we actually have a curriculum that we follow. We feel like it creates structure and teaches kids how to follow that structure in our absence, because we don't want to be there forever. We want to fade ourselves back so the
Right.
kid's independent. So unlike other organizations, we follow a structured curriculum. It doesn't have to be linear, but it is there to give us sort of a backbone. And 10 years, we're now 10 years in the business. We have offices in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we're really excited to do that. We're opening a new office this year in Louisville, Kentucky, and we serve kids all over the world. Believe it or not, we have clients in Europe, and we've had clients in Africa, and all over the United States. So it's kind of exciting.
Yes, that is exciting. And kudos to you for sticking with it. We were talking a little bit offline of what it's like to start a business. My business is a little over a year old, and it has had a lot of ups, but a lot more downs. Mm-hmm. And but same thing is we recognized just a need in the market with serving families with regards to when you're in real estate, you're looking to buy a home and where are your kids going to go to school? And so the school options have grown so much in the last 5 to 10 years with what the choices are for parents, and certainly with school choice continuing to ramp up, and parents now having opportunities to subsidize private school tuition with state dollars and things of that nature. And I think we're going to see that continue to grow. There was just this gap. And so with my wife and I, with our experience in education combined for almost 40 years, and certainly in the metro Atlanta area for a long time, and practicing real estate, we just saw an opportunity to just add one other little layer to supporting folks when they're looking for homes, especially if they have school age children. And so, but nonetheless, it's rare, it's new, it's unique. And so trying to figure out how to leverage our expertise to put it out in front of people to say, hey, here's a niche that might support you. So you are encouraging me to stick with it and not quit. And maybe in 10 years from now, I'll be having that same celebration.
I hope so. I mean, what you're doing is marrying the two most important investments, right? Our children. Yeah. Right. And so that is a huge investment, so that we want them to grow and develop and launch. Right. And then also a family's biggest investment, which is usually their house. Right. And if you can accomplish both simultaneously, why wouldn't you? Right. Why wouldn't you?
That's exactly the question we asked. And so some folks are answering that question for us, but it is exciting nonetheless. And we have the opportunity to network excuse me, with a lot of different schools across the area, get to know the great things that are happening. And Atlanta is so rich with really good schools, and not just private. A lot of our public school systems are outstanding. And so, again, it can just be overwhelming. And I know most folks will go to greatschools.org and say, oh, hey, is it 8 out of 10? We're not going to look at a school that's less than an 8 out of 10. And I get that, but what does that really mean? And so we're trying to educate families on understanding what that really means, especially for their child, because their child learns differently than a lot of other kids. And would that 8 out of 10 serve them? Does it have the right program? Does it have the right values? And I'm speaking to the choir here.
Right.
So also, with that said, go ahead.
Where you start isn't always where you're going to end up.
Right.
Because your kids change. The kid you have in 3rd grade isn't the same kid you have in 8th grade. Right. And schools change. So be flexible. I think mental flexibility in that space, it's always, you think it's one thing, but you gotta support the kid you see in front of you, not the kid that you think you have, right? But really support the kid that you do have, because they
Yeah.
can feel that.
And I love that you said that, because that is such an important piece for us as parents to latch onto.
Mhm.
Because sometimes it's, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But do you really know if it's broken or not if
Mhm.
we're kind of just coasting? And you're right, kids change, schools change, and the fact that there are so many choices available to parents right now is a great asset to them. I know
Absolutely.
we kind of get entrenched, and we're creatures of habit, and we like that mascot. It's the Knights at our school, and how could I
Right,
leave the Knights to go to the Lions? But nonetheless, having an open mind, and I think you said mental flexibility,
Mhm.
is a great asset. But let's shift to the topic that we're here to talk about, and that is executive functioning.
Sure,
And so, share with our viewers and our listeners a little bit about what executive functioning is,
sure.
and what is its importance for kids in school.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, executive functioning is a set of mental processes that involve emotional regulation generally, that enables people to evaluate resources and make a plan and follow through. Right. So, in that definition, there are 12 discrete skills that fall within that. A couple of them are organization, task initiation, time management, emotional control, self control, as far as impulse control, task perseverance, stress tolerance, all of those different things, goal directed persistence. So when you look at that, we call it an umbrella, right? An umbrella of skills. Essentially, it's the ability to evaluate resources, make a plan, and follow through. Now, sounds simple, right? But there's a lot of potential interruptions and hiccups along the way. I mean, you need executive function skills to get out of the house every day,
Right.
right? You need executive function skills to plan Thanksgiving dinner. You need executive function skills to prepare for a test, right? So these are all skills that are necessary. Even though you can define it, it doesn't really help you cultivate the skill, right? So you think about that. Just a little bit more about executive function. It lives in the prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is where you would imagine here, right
Mhm.
behind the forehead. And it develops between the ages of 13 and 25. Notice I said develops.
Mhm.
I did not say it's developed.
Right.
Right. So, what I explain to parents and kids sometimes is, if you feel friction, if you feel tension, if you feel like have a skill deficit, or you don't know how to do something related to these skills, that's normal, because you haven't developed them. So, just like if you want to get better at tennis, what do? You play somebody who's better than you. You drill and you practice, right? And you compete, right? Which raises your skill level. Developing executive function skills is no different, right? With deliberate and intentional practice and consistency and application, you're going to improve those skills too.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, the first thought that popped in my mind is that idea of muscle memory, right? The more we practice something, the more reps we have on a
Sure.
certain skill, the more our brain kind of nurtures, and it becomes wired to
That's
perform
exactly.
that skill at a higher rate. And so I like your tennis analogy there, and I think that's applicable everywhere else. I was thinking too, a few years ago, I took over Thanksgiving dinner, and it was a hot mess. So I probably am lacking
You're
some of
brave.
those executive functioning skills,
You're brave.
and haven't been invited to take the lead on that sense. But
Yeah.
the turkey was good; it came out good. But all the other things and putting it together, I needed some help with that.
The funny thing you say is, one of my kids plays sports at a pretty competitive level, and one of his coaches was explaining on Twitter that he had the same thing, and
Yep.
and I said, well, this is your rep number one, #compete, and he was all agitated, right? Because he's a competitive,
Yeah.
coach. So, but you're exactly right. Like, the first time we do something, it can be hard, it can be frustrating, you can encounter failure, right? And so, one of the questions we always ask parents and also kids is, how do we respond to that, right? Like, we encounter students who will throw up their hands and say, well, I'm just not good at that, right?
Right.
Well, of course, you're not good at that. You have a one of one experience,
Right.
right? You didn't go to chef school, you're not a project planner. This is a learned skill. And so part and parcel to executive functions is the ability to have what's called a growth mindset, or what Angela Duckworth has defined as grit, right? The ability to persevere when things are difficult. Responding to setbacks is something we focus on tremendously across the services we provide for students, because it is the linchpin for kids moving forward, right? And so you think about, schools have labels for parents like snowplow, people have heard, right? Snowplow, helicopter, right?
Lawnmower. Yes. Yes.
Mower, right? All of the things, right? But what are they really getting at is if we remove every obstacle that our child encounters, they're going to learn they're not capable. They're not going to practice responding to it, and they're not going to believe they are able to do that and develop the skills. So you might see or say, don't steal a learning opportunity from them. Don't take the natural consequence away from them. Sit there with them, marinate in it with them, maybe ask some good questions like, what do you think happened? Because we as parents in today's hurried society and rushed appointments and different events are always like, well, this is what happened, and this is how you fix it, and this is what happened. We have to create some curiosity in kids to say like, I wonder what happened. How could you approach that? So that is part and parcel to executive function skills, a growth mindset, developing grit, and understanding that it takes practice and encouragement.
Yeah. And what I'm thinking of there is when you create a space where kids are allowed and even encouraged to fail,
That's
and
right.
it becomes part of their norm,
Mm-hmm.
then the resilience that they are able to develop is paramount, which only helps them function as adults. And so, when I hear you talking, and I envision and I can see kids sitting in my, former classrooms who I knew, were neurodiverse and had challenges and even executive functioning. And it was hard for them. The reality is those difficulties, they built that character in the child. And so, to your point, if we choose to be the parents that swoop in and rescue our kids every single time they are failing, we're not giving them the opportunities to develop those really critical skills that are only going to help them when they are flying the nest. And I wonder if there's a direct relation to those kids who are still living in basements at age 30 with, the lack of opportunities to learn those skills, right?
We see that a lot, particularly more and more. We see a lot of students who are neurodiverse with autism, we'll say, who are not lunching, right? Which is tough. That's a whole separate conversation. And we know lots of families that are working through that. But really, we can start early on by teaching a level of independence and autonomy. You think about how adults feel when they accomplish something well, right? You feel good about it. You feel a sense of pride. You feel a sense of capacity, right? Kids are no different, right? They want to be independent. We're naturally programmed to separate from our parents. That's the joy of the teenagers. And I say joy in quotes, right? Of separating and becoming independent. And then part of that is giving them the opportunity to develop those skills as well. So I think there's a fine balance between the let them fail and do it for them, right? I think we need to be careful, because a lot of people say, well, let them do it. Well, when you have a neurodiverse student and they don't know where to begin, right? They can sink to a place where it's very hard to get them to recover. So if you notice that they're struggling, having a resource like an executive function coach and understand how to create successful steps so they can move up the ladder is an important part of their personal development.
Yeah. And good point, because that leads to really knowing your child, right? That as a parent, but also, whoever is in front of them in the classroom at the school, that the teacher really knows the child. And it's the experience or the challenges or that ladder, if you will, is going to look different for a child who's neurodiverse and has a different capacity intellectually or emotionally versus someone who's not.
Correct.
And so that leads me to this question: as parents are understanding that executive functioning obviously is a big part of child development, whether a child is neurodiverse or not. And how can parents evaluate the quality of executive functioning in a school as they're out there and they're thinking about their children going to a certain school, whatever age, elementary, middle, or high school?
Right.
Is there a way for them to better understand how a school provides opportunities for kids to master the skill or develop the skill?
That's a great question. Every school is different, right?
Right.
And every person's experience is different. And Effective Students, we serve kids in almost every school in Metro Atlanta, or have at some point. Public, private, doesn't matter. I would say that a lot of times, if a student is recommended for a study skills classroom, or what I would call a tools classroom, it's a really good idea to say, what's the curriculum you're using and how are you going to measure the outcomes, right? How do you measure if my child's learning
Right.
something in this classroom? Um, and that's just sort of a good thing to ask. I think that by and large, historically, schools have believed that kids with neurodiversity just need more time, right? They need more time to complete work. They need more time, right? Maybe, but they also need structured practice,
Right.
right? If I said I needed more time to learn how to hit a good serve, sure, but I'd also need structured practice to get me there, and application and accountability and someone giving me feedback when I might not be able to read the room, right? So all of those things are combined. Another question is really, do we want kids pulled out of specials in order to be in a tools class? Because kids with neurodiversity really flourish in the arts. They need the physical exercise, right? It helps reset and process that cognitive load that they're being faced with in every academic setting. Do we really want them to miss that, right? If it can be accomplished another way for them to get some reprieve and reset their neurodiversity and their brains kind of back into the learning mode. So again, there's no one size fits all. But I think they're great questions to ask, and we respect that parents have budgets. I was a parent, I have budget,
Right.
right? So you want to be cognizant of that. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it's a good point because your example of supplementing a study skills class by removing a specials class of some sort, whether that be art, music, PE, or drama, or the other variety of opportunities kids have in schools, is like it could be trading one challenge by creating another.
Correct.
And I think that is certainly something for parents to truly understand. And I think you hit the nail on the head, and that is just ask, right? So if a parent is, if executive functioning or those types of study skills are important because they know their child needs them, then when you're on a school tour or you're visiting a school, using that opportunity to go ahead and ask the question and see what kind of response you get.
I just want to say one more thing about that. It's important to understand the difference between strategies and training.
Right.
Okay, so there's a very big difference, right? I could have a strategy of how I held my tennis grip a certain way. I could have a strategy about the different ways I could throw up the ball for my serve, or I could be trained to execute well. So let's not confuse strategies, which is a variety of suggestions about how to do something, because that's not what training does. That's not what coaching does. Coaching is moving someone from one position or set of skills to another and more proficient set of skills so they're able to compete in whatever that is.
Yeah.
Soccer, tennis, school.
Right. And I'm very glad you made that distinction because I wouldn't want parents to be misunderstood or to misunderstand that schools don't really train kids with executive functioning skills. They build opportunities to apply strategies. And so if a student is in high need of that coaching or that training, that's when they would seek out somebody like yourself at Effective Students, who is providing this service that will then be able to be applied in the school setting and be able to leverage the opportunities for kids to be more successful. So I'm glad you made that distinction, if you will.
Yeah, well said. Well said there. Yeah, I agree.
I am looking at the clock here, and it's hard to believe it's already been 23 minutes. And so I'm going to shift gears real quick, Rachel, and certainly want to give you the opportunity to have the final word before we go off. But the podcast is sponsored by Family to Family Relocation and Real Estate, which is a business that I've created. And so, we focus on schools and homes. And so part of that is the home piece. And so for folks who are not familiar with Atlanta, folks who may be listening, or watching and maybe they're thinking about relocating to Atlanta or just want to better understand, the metro Atlanta area. I'd love to give them an idea of your experience here. You live in the Buckhead area. You work in Cobb County, which is on the northwest side of the Atlanta area. And so if, families are visiting the area or thinking about relocating to the metro Atlanta area, what are 2 or 3 things that you think would be critical for them to know about this area?
There are great choices everywhere. Atlanta is growing at such a rate. It's hard to even keep up with it, having lived here since 87, right? So there's so many changes that are happening. You can't miss the Battery, right? You
Yeah.
can't miss aspects of downtown Atlanta, right? The Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And like the sporting events that we have here in Atlanta are just incredible, right? But culturally, and if you like nature, there, you've got a hike, you've got a wonderful river, the Chattahoochee River. There's lots of parks that you can take lovely walks and ride your bikes. If you like running, there's the Peachtree Road Race. If there's winter events down at the Woodruff Art Center. So there's so many different ways to plug in. If you like restaurants, you can't go wrong about it, but go to the square. I mean, it's Darlin and Marietta. There's so many great places. It's just a throwback of Old Town kind of square, but with new restaurant choices and amazing theaters in a small town feel. So I really like it there. Those are kind of my favorite stopping places. Me personally, I absolutely love Italian food. So you shouldn't miss Dorico Fresco if you come into Atlanta.
And Dorico Fresco, where is that located?
It's here in downtown in Buckhead. Okay. So they make their own pasta. It's just fantastic.
Okay. That's a new one. And I'm Italian by descent. I've got to go check that one out. But yeah, I echo. So we actually live just a few miles from Marietta Square, and we spend a good amount of time there when we decide to go out to eat, or just when the weather's nice. It's a great place to just kind of be outside. And but Tiffany and I need to do a better job of getting into Atlanta to experience restaurants like the one you just described. So thank you for sharing that. I think that really sums up Atlanta really well. And so thank you for sharing that. Final word for our listeners and viewers.
Life is a journey, right? And raising kids is a marathon.
Yeah.
Right. And your kids' needs are going to change. Your needs are going to change. Right. Remember to enjoy the process, right? If you think back to that movie Parenthood with Steve Martin, right? And you have this vision of them on the roller coaster, and Steve Martin is holding on for dear life, right? And his wife is just laughing and laughing. It's just, and you could be one person to the other person in the movie. Just remember to enjoy the ride. We're all a work in progress.
Well said. Well said. And it goes by so fast. It goes by so fast. So Rachael Barron, founder of Effective Students here in the Metro Atlanta, celebrating 10 years this year, and has offices in Charlotte, North Carolina, getting ready to open up in Louisville, Kentucky. And so congratulations on your success, and thank you for all you do to support kids and their journey in their education. And so folks, thank you for taking the opportunity to join us again here on the Right School Matters podcast, where we strive to provide information for you as parents and families to make good informed decisions about where your kids are going to school. And if we can help support that, as well as your own home search here in the Metro Atlanta area, reach out to Family Relocation and Real Estate. And so with that, I will say, have a great day and God bless.